My girlfriend and I went back and forth pitching each other custom card designs, then had to go off on our own, build the cards, and put 4 copies of each into a 40 card deck with nothing else except for standard legal lands. In this way, we were able to improvise an entire custom deck with minimal actual effort. All of the designs were made as quickly as we could and intentionally kept vague in the pitches so we could actually try to make good designs in the build. But even then, we were trying to make them fast, and a lot of these are pretty sloppy designs that would need a ton of refinement. This is more like an improvised playtest than a real custom deck. But first, we had to actually pitch the cards. B went first, and she had this idea in her head of making a self-mill deck. So she started with an enchantment that was based on old Rutstein.
So I always liked the Rutstein thing, but I've never really been able to justify them.
Where at the beginning of your turn, you mill a card, and then depending on what you mill, you get various effects.
Free mana enchantment, black-green, mills once per turn, and whenever you mill a card type, you get a thing.
The difference between this and Old Rutstein, other than being an enchantment, is that it also triggers whenever you mill a card. So you get that additional value on top of just that first one per turn. For my first card, I didn't have a strong archetype in mind, but I did figure that ramping into something big would be a lot of fun. And since B's card was pitched as green-black, I figured I wouldn't go into either of those colors, and instead decided to do big blue, because it's something I think is really fun, but kind of underexplored. I got it. Okay. Blue artifact, when you draw your second card each turn, make colorless. For me, I wanted a mana rock that felt blue. So I decided that it would be a mana rock that rewards me when I draw cards. I feel like names are important. They're a great way of pitching a card, and then you sort of have to build something that makes sense to that. So in addition to our general outlines, I encouraged us to give actual name pitches. As a name, though, I should probably give it. I'm thinking, I almost want it to be like, can I have it like Remora's Bauble? Is that it? Yeah, I'm gonna go with Remora's Bauble. So for that, I decided this card should be called Remora's Bauble. Very mana-making, but also with that reference to card draw, a la the Mystic Remora. For B's second card, she knew she wanted a creature, and figured something inspired by Lurgoyf would make sense. Something where its stats are based on the creatures in your graveyard.
The theme of this deck is going to be like self-mill, but also exiling matters, because as a lower self-mill, rest in peace is the bane of my existence.
She wanted to give a little bit of protection from graveyard hate, though, and instead had it trigger based off of exiling cards. I asked her what the name would be, and she thought it would be some kind of swamp worm. Cool. Do you have an idea for a name?
I think it's like some kind of like swamp worm is what this is. Like and it's got the worm WUR type.
Of course, yes.
Actually, no. I think it would be cooler if it was a giant, like, traditional worm.
Oh, cool. Yeah, worm is a real creature type in Magic. Originally thinking worm with a U, but then thought it'd be kind of cool to make it worm with an O, and actually start building a worm kindred strategy.
Actually, yeah, let's do some worm kindred stuff.
The card then shifted into this thing that didn't just buff itself, but all worms you control. For my second card, I was inspired by naming the previous one Remora's Bauble, and thought maybe I'd go into some kind of fisher thing. Now I'm wondering if I want to do some fish stuff, because I just love doing that. It's so dumb. I'm so predictable. I had this idea a while ago for a card called the Arcane Angler that had this little cycle of fish in every color that you could then try and catch, like search up with them or something. I never figured out the concept, so it didn't feel like it was out of line for this impromptu build idea. I think drawing is very Fisher, right? Like you're pulling something out of the library, and it would synergize with the Remora, so that sounds cool. I'm thinking a weird like card draw matters deck. Okay, weird. For this, I went with Arcane Angler, a blue creature that could get in damage, and then when it does do damage to a player, I get to draw a card. If that card's a fish, I get some kind of benefit, which I didn't really define in the initial pitch. This idea of revealing a card feels a little bit weird, because normally you'd say reveal a card if it's a fish, blah, either way, put it into your hand, but I wanted it to count as draw for the previous card, triggering off of that. And it's not like it's without precedent. Miracle was the one I actually brought up during the pitch meeting, but there's also a number of other creatures that I found when I actually sat down to build the card. For B's third card, she started by thinking about Grist, which at the time had recently been revealed as a Modern Horizons 3 card.
Would it be gauche to like make a new Grist? I've been thinking about Grist since like I saw Spoiled for Modern Horizons 3.
which seemed like a really cool idea to make another Grist, but instead she got inspired to make a Planeswalker version of Dina.
I mean, we have like one of those kids become a Planeswalker. Maybe they all should be. Maybe we need Dina Planeswalker.
Oh yeah, you're right. I completely forgot. Yeah, Quintarius is one of the Strixhaven squad, as they were popularly known in the short-run TV show.
That totally existed.
Yeah, in the 90s.
Yeah.
She had a few ideas about what Dina could do, but I basically gave her a blank check saying, Planeswalker Dina, great pitch of a card, have at it. Since I wanted to keep things moving, and because most likely a card like that's going to require a lot of refinement to actually get right, and that's more time than we had. Next, after pitching the Arcane Angler, I of course need some fish. Alright, I need a fish now, and I do want to like ramp into big fish, but I need to start small probably. And I just wanted them to be simple. So I pitched white fish with a pun in its name that is just a flying 2/2 with vigilance, or whatever the stats end up being after I take the time to fiddle with them. But the pitch was just that I wanted a soul that was a spirit. That's it. It's a heavenly soul. We're modern magic design, baby! It's puns all the way down! B came back with her own flyer with a pitch of a red insect.
I was thinking like expanding into Jund, and I think red insect, and then they could be fire beetles.
Point being is she wanted to make a red card, and she wanted to maybe sort of retheme the entire deck concept around the idea of not just worms, but pests and insects. In the same way that Blex from Strixhaven specifically lists a whole bunch of pest-type creatures. In this way, she can make an insect that can fly, and still fitting this sort of general theme of worms and such. After making my small fish, I needed to have a top-end fish. I pitched a big thing that when it takes damage, you draw that many cards. So hey, no, don't block me. But also I wanted to give it some kind of protection from just being chump blocked by a 1/1. I don't want it to just have flying, because I want you to be able to block it. I just want there to be like an interesting exchange of bits. I didn't want to give it trample, that's too green, and I didn't want to just make it unblockable because that kind of defeats the point. Instead, I tried to come up with an idea for if you don't block this, you get tapped down. In the initial pitch, I didn't really know exactly how it would work, but something that uses stun counters and makes the opponent make a choice between blocking this big threat or having their board get tapped down the following turn. At this point, we start thinking about how we only have 2 cards left each to make. So we needed to make sure that everything we need can be done in those last 2 cards. B pitches a pretty simple red card draw effect, where it draws cards but has some downside.
I think I want a red sorcery that draws and discards.
Instead of using the common impulse draw effect of exiling cards, you may cast them at the end of the turn, it draws cards but then discards cards at random.
And that, I know random effects tend to make cards real bad, but it's the only way I can think of to make draw free cards feel red.
The exact cost and structure of that card was left pretty up in the air, but the basic idea of random discard was well cemented at this point. I then pitched a white removal spell that uses exile in the style of O-Ring, but I wasn't sure exactly what I wanted to do with it. For some reason, I thought it would be interesting to bring in the idea of involving a creature, some kind of big fish swallows small person kind of a situation. So I need to bounce an idea off of you because I'm not exactly sure how this would work, especially keeping with my blue-white color identity. It's kind of like a bite, but it's almost like a white bite, if that makes sense. And I just kind of floated it to B, who then responded with, what if it's an O-Ring that's an aura?
Maybe it could be an aura, an Oblivion Ring aura.
And that just fully inspired me into this design of a enchantment aura that exiles a permanent when it comes to the battlefield, and then the enchanted creature gets bonuses based on the mana value of the exiled permanent. This does a couple interesting things because since it's an O-Ring effect, when the enchantment goes away, the creature comes back. And since that enchantment is on a body, suddenly killing the creature brings the creature back, not just needing some form of enchantment removal. Since I thought it was a little unfair to her that B was going first in all of this, I offered to do 2 back-to-back cards and then she could finish with hers. My final card I wanted to also be removal, but instead of being white removal, it's blue removal. The white removal increasing the ability of the enchanted creature that holds the O-Ring, this blue one helping me draw cards. I'm debating whether or not I want a second piece of removal or if I want some more reliable card draw. Because right now I have a card that doesn't do anything unless I draw cards. First, I wasn't sure exactly how I wanted to work, but we ended up bouncing ideas back and forth until I settled on a tap down effect that also works as recurring card draw, where on my turn, I get to choose which effect I want. So I can either not tap down the creature and I get to draw a card, or I do tap down the creature and I don't get to draw the card. Two different effects on the same card, but not in a way that was additive, just in a way that gives me versatility. B now has her last card, and she of course decides she still needs some removal, so she goes with using green mana to fight, but then adding an extra rider based on her other colors.
A creature you control fights a creature your opponent controls.
Sure.
If your creature dies during this, your opponent has to sacrifice another creature.
At the time, she pitched maybe going with a black effect added to the fight, where if the creature died, the opponent must sacrifice a creature. But in the end, she ended up going with a red rider of getting to deal damage based on the dying creature's power. This rounded out our pitching session. We then went off, built our cards, and came back together with 40 card decks. Turns out I really didn't have a great solution for recording actual gameplay, so I'm just gonna skip forward through most of this. I don't think actually watching us play the game is super entertaining. Something I really liked about this whole experience so far is just like, once I made the 6 cards, like that's it. I just like make 4 copies and I add lands. Like it feels kind of jumpstart-y in a way. Once we were done building our cards, we started off with a best 2 out of 3. The first 3 games were pretty miserable. I got completely mana screwed. B floored me, and then right at the end, she died to her own enchantment, and I won on the spot having done basically nothing. Right, exile a card at random from your discard pile and cast a copy of it, then lose life equal. So what happens if you can't cast it?
I think it should be a May, but the life plus it's on May.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, that would not be in the spirit of the card.
Great.
And I'm gonna shuffle, draw. If I draw that card, I lose. I'd lose.
Burning Gambit. You take 8. Oh, you're at 8. Next few games were equally pretty one-sided, or at least nothing interesting happened. During this time, however, we did kind of live tinker or hot fix our cards. My Remora's Bauble started as a card that would give me mana the second time I drew a card in a turn, but that would usually happen during my draw step or upkeep, making the mana completely just fizzle. This should say something like, tap, add colorless, activate only if you've drawn 2 or more cards this turn.
Yeah, I think I actually like that just because like I feel like artifacts need to have like a tap abilities or activate abilities.
Yeah, that would make sense. It's really easy to design a card in a vacuum that you think works a specific way, and then once you see in practice, you realize the flaws of it. So as we were playing, whenever something didn't work as intended, we changed the rules to make sure it did function. Later, we start actually balance changing stuff. Actually, okay, before we go to the next game, hot fix for Remora. Would you say just 2 mana, or do you think it needs more than that, to be fair?
I would prefer it was if it produced 1 mana and it stayed the same otherwise.
Oh, one mana,
make 1 mana.
But still only 1 mana. Okay, I'd be good with that. That sounds fun. All right, cool. We'll try that this time. Seeing the cards develop as we played them, because it really did turn into a playtest, was pretty cool. Most of B's cards stayed the same, except for some wording to make them actually function, whereas otherwise they would cause you to have to pay for the free spell or whatever, stuff like that. The only real change we made to her cards was that Horror Market no longer did double damage to yourself. For me, there was the aforementioned Remora's Bauble, changing it so that it would be only generating 1 mana when you tapped it. Still a pretty efficient mana stone, but it is very situational. It's not always that you're going to have a free card coming in. And last, the Banish to the Belly was changed to not give +X/+X, but instead give +O/+X. We do the thing, tap 3, Banish to the Belly. Before we go, evaluating this card, it's way too strong. What are your thoughts on it? Should we just like find a way to make it weaker, or should it just cost more mana? B thought that increasing the power wasn't very white, and I think it works really well, right? You're just well fed and you're tankier, but you're not actually gonna hit any harder. Feels really, really good, and it definitely needed a bit of a nerf, so I'm really happy with that change. +O/+X would be actually really cool. I would love that change. That change would be rad.
You want to implement it now?
I still win, so sure.
Yeah, sure, yeah.
I don't know if I just
Okay,
don't want to
cool.
end on the map. Yeah, honestly, I love that. But does 3 mana still work if it only does toughness?
I think 3 mana still works if it's that, yeah.
Cool. All right. I'm really happy with the changes we've implemented to my cards during this. I wasn't really thinking of it as a playtest exactly, but like it was. Like that's how that works. All in all, this was an absolute blast, and I would definitely do it again. I just really need to find a better way of recording these games. We had like 3, maybe 4 hours of footage, and I don't think any of it's good. Which is a real shame. But this video certainly would not have gotten finished if I didn't just skip all of the gameplay. Not just because it doesn't look that great, but because it was absolutely impossible to create even a single watchable game out of that entire nonsense. I would love to talk about these cards a bit more, but also there's already like 4 hours of footage that I need to sift through, and I feel like we've said most of what we want to say throughout the games.
Yeah, totally, yeah.
I mean, the funny thing is, like, everything said throughout the games, a lot of that's probably going to get cut. So saying it all now would make a lot of sense, because then I can just have it all at the end and not have to worry about it. But I am spent. I am done. I need to go. So have a good night, everyone. I will see you next time. Blah, blah, blah. This might not even be being recorded, because my computer's out of... I can't say words anymore. Good night!